I've been in caves all over the country, from tourist traps to deep systems that take hours to get into and even longer to get out of. But I've only ever walked out of one with the feeling that something had followed me. It wasn't a big cave. It didn't have a name on any map. The locals called it that hollow near the tree line. I first heard about it from a hunter I met while waiting out a storm in a ranger station. He said he found it by accident while tracking a deer. No trail, no signs, simply a break in the rock that didn't feel right. He didn't go in far. Said it had a bad kind of silence. I thought he meant unstable structure, or maybe the natural eeriness caves have. But the way he said it stuck with me. Months later, I was passing through that part of the state and decided to find it. I packed light, a little bit of gear, enough to map the entrance and poke around. The hollow was right where he described. Buried behind low growth and half-collapsed stone, easy to miss even if you were standing in front of it. The temperature dropped the second I stepped inside. That happens sometimes, especially in deeper systems. But this was different. It felt like the cold had been waiting. The first stretch was uneventful. Damp walls, loose scree underfoot, and the low ambient drip you get in natural caverns. I moved slowly, marking direction changes in chalk, counting paces out of habit. My GPS cut out almost immediately. No surprise there, being that deep in the earth. About 20 minutes in, I heard a sound behind me, a sudden whoosh, like air being drawn through a tight opening. I stopped, waited. Nothing followed. Caves breathe, they settle. That's what I told myself. But a few minutes later, I heard it again, this time closer. It had shape, like breath being pushed into something similar to speech. I let my light drift behind me slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements that might startle whatever could be lurking in the shadows. After years in caves, I've learned that unseen creatures can be more frightened than threatening, and that panicking only makes things worse. The tunnel was empty, but the air had changed. It felt heavier, thicker, nearly suffocating. Then came a whisper, barely audible at the edge of my hearing. Not a word, but a suggestion of one. I moved on. I wasn't there for stories. I was there to mark depth, shape, and direction. If I turned back at the first weird noise, I'd never get anything done. The chalk marks helped me track progress, but something about the cave was harder to follow. I'd glance back at sections I'd passed and it wouldn't look quite the same. Slopes felt slightly wrong. Angles that had seemed level tilted. I told myself it was fatigue. Then I felt it again, that pressure behind me. The space around me felt disturbed, like something had moved through it seconds before I passed. Another whisper floated in, barely loud enough to know it was real and not my imagination. This time I couldn't pretend I hadn't heard it. I turned and came face to face with the hard stone wall of the cave. I began to doubt my senses, but despite that I kept going. I'd come too far to justify turning back over whispers and nerves. I told myself I needed to finish what I started. The tunnel narrowed slightly. My helmet scraped the ceiling in places. I angled my light down to avoid shadows stretching too far. My radio, the one that was clipped to my shoulder, crackled once with static. Then, underneath it, something else. A voice, garbled, broken by interference. It was mine. Something I'd said to myself earlier. It played back distorted, as if the cave had recorded it and was trying to mimic the sound. I shut the radio off. I don't remember deciding to turn around. One moment I was pressing forward. The next I realized that the tunnel ahead felt familiar. The slope, the texture of the walls. I thought I'd marked this stretch already. Whether I doubled back or something had shifted, I couldn't say. But when I turned around to retrace my steps, the cave no longer looked unfamiliar. Eventually the entrance reappeared, just like that. A faint shaft of daylight, pale against the walls. I stepped outside and everything snapped back. Sound, color, space. The pressure lifted. I sat near the rocks, not far from the opening, and let myself breathe. Nothing had chased me. Nothing had touched me. But something had been there. I've never gone back. I know I shouldn't. There's no reason to. But the thought's been creeping in more often. Not fear, not even curiosity. More like an itch beneath the surface of my thoughts, spreading until it's hard to think about anything else when I'm alone. I tell myself it's irrational. I go over the risks. And still, part of me keeps looking for a reason to return. That was the end of our first story. Let me know in the comments what you thought about it. Hit like and subscribe if you've enjoyed the content so far. And don't forget the notification bell. I'd love for you to send me your scary experiences to be read on this channel, whatever they might be. The sites to send them to are up on the screen. Now there will be no further interruptions from me, and here are the rest of the stories. The rain came faster than we expected, and the cave was the only shelter for miles. What happened inside felt like hours, but my watch said it was only minutes. It was supposed to be a simple day hike, just the three of us. Me, Jamie, and Taylor, running a familiar ridge trail we'd all done before. The kind of route you don't even have to think about. Same turns, same tree scars, same worn boot tracks. The air had that early autumn stillness to it, crisp and dry. The weather was perfect when we started, dry, cool, and quiet. None of us brought real rain gear. That's the kind of arrogance you build over time, convincing yourself the mountains owe you consistency, just because they've been kind before. We were 2 hours out when the first drop hit my face. 10 seconds later, the sky opened like it had been waiting to surprise us. Cold, heavy rain dumped down hard enough to sting, soaking through our clothes almost instantly. The trail turned slick, and the wind pushed the rain sideways. Visibility dropped. We were laughing at first, yelling over the wind and slipping through puddles. Then Jamie spotted a cave. It was maybe 30 feet off the trail, half hidden by tangled brush and a run of split rock. A slit in the hillside, almost like the land had been cracked open. None of us remember seeing it before. I hike with a GPS journal and had never marked anything like it. Still, the wind was cutting sideways and the trees above offered no real cover. We ducked inside. The cave was colder than I expected. Damp stone walls, the scent of wet rock and old leaves. It wasn't very deep. We guessed 30, maybe 40 feet back before it pinched off into darkness. Jamie peeled out of her soaked hoodie and sat down on a flat stone. Taylor leaned against the wall, water running off his hair. I stood near the mouth, just watching the rain fall in thick gray sheets across the valley below. Then I checked my watch, 1:04 p.m. I remember it because I made a mental note, 20 minutes tops. If the storm didn't ease up, we'd push through it and deal with the mud. I checked again 5 minutes later. It still said 1:04. The second hand jerked forward, then back. I tapped the glass like that would fix anything. Jamie noticed and held up her phone. Her screen flickered once, locked on 1:06, then jumped to 1:09, then back. Taylor's compass app spun, even when he stood still. GPS refused to load. He smacked the phone against his palm like that would help. Caves mess with the signals, he said. Not really that weird. I nodded, but something didn't sit right. To kill time, we just talked. Dumb stuff. Old hiking stories, friends from college. The time Taylor thought a raccoon was a bear. But nobody really focused. There was this weight behind everything, like the cave had swallowed up all the momentum we came in with. Then Taylor reached for his water bottle and froze. It was right here, he said. We all looked. He'd set it beside his pack, just like always. But now it was gone. We checked around, cleared out a couple feet of rock. Nothing. You sure you didn't leave it outside? I asked. I'm positive, he snapped. It was right here. I looked at Jamie. She looked back at me, uneasy now. Minutes later, she pulled out a granola bar from her pack. It had been unopened when we left the car. I remember her tucking it in. Now the wrapper was torn halfway down and the bar inside was already bitten into. She stared at it for a long time before saying, I didn't eat this. I didn't know what to say. That's when I noticed my jacket was gone. It had been right next to my bag, wadded up like a pillow. I checked under it, around it. Jamie even helped me look. Nothing. "You had it when we came in," she said. Taylor stood and pointed toward the mouth of the cave. "Maybe it fell outside." I climbed over a slick boulder and stepped out. There it was, laid across a smooth rock, neatly folded. Dry, even though we'd walked through a downpour. I didn't say anything, just picked it up and slipped it back on. That's when Jamie said, "Can we mark where we came in, just in case?" I started to object, but then I looked behind us and realized I couldn't tell where the entrance had been. The way the rock curved, the narrow folds of space, it all looked the same. Taylor used his boot heel to scrape a big scuffed X into the dirt near the opening. We all watched him do it. He then made a trail back to where we were all sitting. It wasn't a big cave, but it felt bigger now and colder. We waited and listened to the storm fade. None of us were very talkative now. When we checked the marks that had been made after what felt like 10 minutes, they were gone. No dirt displacement, no smudge. Just smooth packed stone like no one had touched it. That was when we decided to leave. We walked around for a while trying to find the way out again. Even though the cave was bowl-shaped, we couldn't find the exit at first. When Jamie finally did find the path out, it looked longer than I remembered. The cave was only 30 feet deep, but every step back felt stretched, like the walls had moved while we sat still. We finally stepped into daylight, but something was wrong. The rain had stopped, but it didn't feel like any storm had ever been there. I checked my watch. It said 1:17 p.m. 13 minutes. That's all. We'd been in there for what felt like at least an hour, maybe even 2. Taylor opened his pack as we hit the trail again, looking for his water bottle. It was still gone. "Found it?" Jamie asked. "No," he said. "Guess I left it in there." We didn't talk much on the hike back. I kept expecting to see the cave again from the trail, but it never showed. Just tree after tree after tree. Sometimes I wonder if we really left it behind. Other times I wonder if part of us stayed there, and we just haven't noticed what's missing yet. We moved to Kentucky in the middle of summer, when the air was so thick it felt like it clung to your skin. The town was small, 2 stoplights and a single gas station, and it didn't take long for boredom to set in. I met Logan at school orientation, and we bonded quickly over the fact that neither of us had grown up around forest this dense. Exploring became our routine. After school, on weekends, whenever the humidity dropped below unbearable. The land here felt older somehow. The trees grew close together, thick-limbed and dark beneath the canopy. The ground soft with years of fallen pine needles and leaf rot. You could walk for hours and never hear a car, never see another person. The kind of quiet that changes the way you move. We'd been hiking the same stretch behind his grandfather's property when we noticed a break in the brush, a narrow path cut into the trees. Not fresh, but traveled. The grass was beaten down in places, and something about it felt purposeful. We followed it without saying anything, the way you do when instincts take over before logic can catch up. The path led downhill, deeper into a part of the forest neither of us had touched before. Eventually it curved around a lichen-covered outcrop and opened into a small hollow, choked with kudzu and brambles. That's where we saw the cave. It wasn't large, just a narrow mouth in the limestone, half concealed by overgrowth. If you didn't know it was there, you'd walk right past it. We stood at the edge for a moment, staring at it in the same way you might watch an animal just step into your path. Curious, cautious, unsure if it had seen you first. The air changed as we moved closer, cooler but tinted with something sharp and artificial, sweet and metallic. I didn't recognize it at the time, but later I would. The cave was shallow at first. Damp walls carved by time and runoff reflected our flashlight beams in dull wet streaks. But there was more than just rock. Folded tarps, empty food wrappers, and a rusted-out camping chair sat pushed against the wall. Further in, just beyond a low overhang, It opened into a second chamber, and that's when the smell hit us full force. Ammonia, bleach, something acrid that burned the nose and throat. Our lights bounced off glass containers, tubing, and jugs with stained labels. The tarp above us had black scorch marks near the seams. A makeshift chemical station sat against the far wall, and a cooler half buried in a pile of trash gave off a slow drip of melted ice. We stood in the dark for a long moment, taking it in, not fully understanding, but knowing in our bones that we'd stumbled into something we weren't supposed to see. That's when we heard the voices, muffled at first, somewhere outside. Footsteps through damp leaves. The unmistakable clink of a lighter flicking open. Then the low buzz of conversation, casual but close. Flashlight beams grazed the ceiling near the entrance. We moved without thinking, flattening ourselves against the cold stone. The silence in that moment wasn't total. It was pressure, like the cave itself was holding its breath, waiting to see if we'd be discovered. One of the men stepped into the mouth of the cave, light cutting through the dust like a blade. He moved slowly, scanning. His beam passed over the tarp once, then again. Then after a pause, he turned back. We didn't move, didn't speak. Every second stretched out, brittle and ready to snap. When the last voice drifted away, and the light had long since faded, we found a narrow split in the rock behind the tarp, a tunnel barely wide enough to crawl through. On the other side, we emerged into the underbrush about 20 yards from where we'd entered. It was darker now. The trees held the last of the sun in gray silhouettes. The path we had followed in didn't look the same going out. Every branch seemed to reach a little further than before. Every sound felt delayed. We didn't run. Running would have made noise. We walked until the path returned us to the ridge line, until we could see the edge of the old fence again. At home that night, I tried to explain the feeling to myself. It wasn't just fear. It was the awareness that something had been built out there, deliberately hidden where no one would find it, until we did. We hadn't escaped something supernatural, just something real, and that was worse. I never asked Logan if he slept that night. I know I didn't. Because the part that keeps echoing in my head, all this time later, is that when we found the second entrance and crawled through, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. But as I crawled out, heart pounding and hands scraped raw on the stone, I kept expecting to hear footsteps, or worse, someone calling out behind us. Nothing ever came. Still, I didn't turn around until I was all the way out. And even then, I didn't look back for long. It had started the way a lot of dumb ideas do. Two friends bored on a long weekend. I was visiting from out of state, and Kyle had moved to southern Utah for work a few months earlier. He'd gotten really into hiking, especially desert trails and old lava fields. So he drove us out past the edge of the national monument, where the land turned into long black rivers of hardened basalt. The cave wasn't marked on any maps. Kyle had heard about it from a coworker. Just a little lava tube, he told me. Barely over 100 feet, dry, no ropes or gear needed. It took us about half an hour to find the entrance. Just a jagged crack in a sun-bleached ridge. Wind was slipping out of it, cold enough to raise goosebumps. Everything around it was scorched earth and quiet. Not silent exactly, just that dead kind of stillness where even your footsteps feel too loud. We slipped in feet first and dropped the last few feet to the cave floor. It opened wider than I expected. Flat mostly, easy footing. The air was dry and dusty. It felt like nothing had moved in there for a long time. We didn't need flashlights at first. Sunlight reached maybe 20 feet in. But after that, the ceiling dropped, and the light vanished like someone had pulled a curtain behind us. We made the usual dumb jokes about buried treasure, petroglyphs, maybe finding a skull or some weird old bones. Half nervous banter, half stalling. The cave was quiet, almost too quiet. Our boots crunched over the grit, and the echoes came back weird, too fast or not quite where you'd expect them. Then the tunnel curved left, and that's when we saw the bones. They weren't scattered. They were arranged, carefully and with thought. A small ring, maybe 3 feet wide, made of long, thin bones. Ribs, maybe. Inside the circle were smaller pieces, stacked like vertebrae or knuckle joints. Some were blackened at the ends like they'd been burned. Cal crouched down, didn't say anything, just studied them. I could tell he was trying to figure out how concerned we should be. I stepped back. My headlamp hit the far wall and caught more bones piled loosely near a narrow crevice, like someone had dumped them down there. No organization, just a mess. None of it looked fresh, no smell, no skin or sinew, but they were too clean, not weathered, not bleached, just like they hadn't decayed at all. We didn't touch anything, not even with a stick. There were 5 piles, maybe more, each one a little different. One looked like it had been arranged into a crude skeleton, but the bones didn't match up. Another had everything sorted by size. Off to the side, a long bone set by itself, its end dark like it had been scorched or burned. Neither of us said it, but we were both thinking the same thing. Some of these look human. Not definitely, but maybe. That's what messed with me the most, the uncertainty. The pieces were the right size, the right shape, but not exactly. A few were too narrow, some were bent and warped. One was polished smooth. Another was stained orange-red, like it had soaked in something underground. We kept moving. I honestly don't know why. The tunnel sloped down into a tighter corridor, and the air started feeling heavier. I stopped. Kyle crouched and went a little further in, maybe 10 more feet. Then he turned around. "We should head back," he said. We didn't talk about it. At the entrance, I climbed up and offered Kyle a hand. He didn't take it right away. He was staring back into the tunnel, listening. Then he pulled himself up and we left without another word. No animals, no bugs, no sign anyone had been down there in years. But those bones didn't get there by accident. Someone arranged them, and recently. The drive back was mostly quiet. By the time we had cell signal again, the sun was setting. It felt like the whole thing had happened days ago. Later, drinking in his backyard, Kyle said the crevice near the back of the cave didn't look natural. It was too clean, he said, like it had been chiseled. Not ancient, just not recent either. I kept thinking about the burn marks, the polished bone, the staining. We looked up missing person cases. Nothing in the area, nothing close. We did end up reporting it. Kyle submitted something online to the local BLM office a couple days later. Nothing dramatic, just a basic location and description. But we never heard back, not even a confirmation email. I haven't gone back, neither has Kyle, and I still don't know what unsettled me more, the arrangement of the bones or the way Kyle looked when he turned around. When I asked him later what he saw or heard, he just shook his head and said it was nothing. But his face was pale and tight. I've never been a religious person, never believed in angels or anything like that. But what happened in that cave made me reconsider things I thought I knew. It started as a typical weekend hike with my friend Mike. We'd heard about this cave not far from town. Nothing famous, just a local spot people go to explore. The entrance was easy enough to find, tucked under a ridge with sunlight slipping through cracks in the rock. We weren't looking for anything special, just an adventure. We packed headlamps, snacks, and enough water, confident we'd be in and out within a couple of hours. The cave was dry, dusty and quiet, except for the crunch of our boots on loose gravel. At first, we relied on natural light filtering in, but the tunnel quickly narrowed, swallowing the daylight whole. Our headlamps flickered on, casting narrow beams into the darkness. We stepped inside, leaving the sunlight behind. The tunnel was narrow at first, forcing us to duck beneath low-hanging rock. The air grew cooler and heavier as we went deeper. Every few minutes, we'd come across faint scratches on the walls, maybe old graffiti or initials carved by past explorers. Mark joked that whoever left them probably never made it out, but I wasn't laughing. Our headlamps carved small circles of light, barely pushing back the darkness. The further we went, the more the cave seemed to close in around us. At one point, we paused in a wider chamber where the ceiling opened just enough for the faintest trickle of daylight to sneak in from a crack above. We took a quick break, gulping down water, checking our gear. Time felt stretched. The sounds inside the cave warped. Our footsteps echoed unevenly, and distant drips fell at irregular intervals. We'd been inside for about an hour by my watch when Mark's light suddenly flickered and died. He fumbled with the batteries, but nothing. I reached for my pack thinking I'd brought extras. I hadn't. I must have left them on the counter that morning. My headlamp started sputtering before I could even zip it open. The last thing I saw before it went dark was Mark's uneasy face. Pitch dark, no sound except our breathing and distant drips of water. I told myself to stay calm. We knew the way back, or at least I thought we did. Then I heard footsteps. They were slowly coming closer. I couldn't see anything, but I swear I could feel the weight of someone else in that blackness, something patient and strangely comforting. Then came the light, not like a flashlight or headlamp. A soft, warm glow that seemed to seep into the darkness rather than cut through it. It didn't blind or flicker, it just was. The glow took shape, a figure standing still, not moving toward or away. I couldn't make out features, but it felt human. Something calm radiated off of it, like a presence that knew the cave better than I ever could. I never called it an angel at the time. I don't even know what else to call it. The figure didn't speak, didn't move, just stayed there, watching. After a moment, my headlamp flickered back on, weak but enough to see. Mark's light came back too. We followed the glow, slowly making our way out. Outside, the world seemed too bright, too sharp. I looked back once. The cave mouth was dark again. The last light vanished. I still don't know what we saw, or if anyone else ever will. But whatever it was, it felt like protection, like a guardian, and I'm still not sure if I believe in angels. But now I'm not so sure I don't. We weren't supposed to be that far out. The trail dead-ended a while back, but we kept hiking. Just two brothers cutting through old mining roads outside a forgotten town. We spotted the entrance by accident. No gate, no signs. Just a narrow crack in the side of a ridge with cool air spilling out of it. It looked like an old vent shaft or collapsed adit, barely wider than our shoulders. We had headlamps in case we stayed out after dark and no real plans, so we went in. The tunnel sloped down fast. Dust coated everything. Our boots left the first tracks in what looked like years. That's how we noticed the scrape. It was a long, heavy line carved into the dirt down the center of the passage. Not smooth, not uniform. More like something big had been dragged in. The edges of the groove were torn and uneven. About 10 feet along the path, we found a smear across the rock floor. Dark, rusty, and dried at the edges. Blood, not a lot, just enough to change the tone of the day. A few feet further and my brother stopped dead. He aimed his headlamp at the tunnel wall. There were claw marks, 4 deep gouges in the rock, each about as long as my hand. They weren't chipped or cracked like someone had carved them with tools. They were dragged in. You could see the stone peeled back at the edges. We stopped talking after that. We followed the drag mark around a slight bend, where it ended in a rockfall, a partial collapse. The mark disappeared under it. We didn't see anything else, no body, no fur, no gear. But the smell in that bend was off. Wet iron and something animal. We left without saying a word. 3 days later, we went back. I think we both needed to prove it wasn't what we thought it was. The drag mark was gone. In its place, a single set of boot prints, deep and erratic, like whoever made them was limping. They led to the mouth of the tunnel, then stopped, right where we'd stood the first time. We turned to go, and that's when I saw it. Just a glimpse, a shape deeper in the tunnel, low to the ground, too broad in the shoulders. It moved fast, but not like it was running, just shifting, like it didn't need to hurry. Neither of us spoke. We just walked quickly and quietly all the way home. We've never gone back. I have started locking the back door now. My brother keeps a crowbar by his bed. We don't know what we saw, but sometimes when I'm outside alone, late at night, I think I see something moving just at the edge of the tree line. Never when I look straight at it, only out of the corner of my eye. I've always liked caves, not big tourist ones with boardwalks and railings, but the small, ugly ones, the ones that don't have names, the ones you find by accident. There's something about being underground with only your light that sharpens your senses. I don't go for danger. I'm careful, experienced. I mark my paths. I carry backup lights and leave trip details with friends. This cave was maybe half a mile off of Forest Road, tucked behind a granite outcrop. No signage, no path. Just a crack in the hillside and the kind of cold, steady air that tells you the tunnel goes deeper than it looks. I brought my recorder on that trip, not for anything fancy, just a little digital mic I'd started using to keep track of my routes. Sometimes I narrate landmarks, note odd formations, things like that. It's easier than writing and it frees up both hands. I don't usually listen back unless I need to. This time I did. The cave itself was narrow and wet, with low ceilings and slow drips from above. I moved steadily, describing what I saw: a narrow split to the left, a field of white fungus on the right, mineral deposits glinting like quartz. About 20 minutes in, I thought I heard something odd, an echo that didn't sound right. I said a few words out loud to test it. Testing, 1, 2. A beat passed. The sound came back, but not the way it should have. It returned strangely, blurred like the cave was swallowing part of the sound before giving it back. I figured it was the shape of the tunnel. Caves do weird things to sound. I kept going. But the timing kept bothering me. The delay was inconsistent. Sometimes it echoed right away. Sometimes it felt late or early. Once I said, "This chamber's narrowing," and I could have sworn I heard my own voice repeat it a moment before I spoke, like it was a glitch in my brain. I laughed it off, said something into the recorder like, "My brain's echoing faster than the cave." Just a joke. But it started to happen more often. Subtle things. A breath returning before I'd exhaled. My footstep echoing twice, once near and once far. I didn't get scared, not exactly, but I turned around earlier than I usually would have. About 40 minutes in, I had what I needed. I wasn't interested in pushing deeper into weird acoustics alone. I got out fine. The daylight looked a little too bright when I emerged, but that's normal after time underground. The weird part started that night. I decided to scrub through the recording to see if the echo thing had actually been happening, or if it was just in my head. Most of it was normal. My voice calling out formations, boots scuffing gravel, water drips. Then I reached the part where I said, "This chamber's narrowing," and the playback was wrong. The voice, the echo, did come first. Not clearly. It was faint and breathy. My voice, but off. It said the exact words maybe a second or two before I actually spoke them. I rewound, played it again, same thing. I checked the timestamps. Maybe the recorder skipped. Maybe it recorded my sentence twice and shuffled the order. Nope. The waveform was clean. One sentence, then my real one. I started listening closer. At a few points there were extra breaths, little shifts of static that sounded like shuffling cloth, except I hadn't moved. Then around the 30-minute mark, I heard something that didn't match anything I remembered saying. Just after I said, "Turning back soon," there was a soft voice, quiet and low. It said, "Don't." That's all it said. I rewound again, boosted the volume. It was there, but almost a whisper tucked beneath ambient noise. It sounded like me, but I didn't say it. That's when I got a cold feeling. Not terror, not some cinematic jolt of fear, just that deep, dull instinct that something doesn't line up. I didn't listen to the rest. I deleted the file. Not because it scared me, not because I thought it would hurt me. I deleted it because I knew if I listened to it again, I'd want to go back. And I don't know why. I don't believe in ghosts or mirror versions of yourself living in tunnels, but ever since that trip, I've been catching myself glance at cracks in rocks a little too long, watching narrow openings in stone, half expecting to hear something echo back.